Hey, I'm thinking that we were supposed to go over yesterday how to submit some of our projects, but we ran out of time, so I don't know if that's something that we need to cover today.
Yeah, no, let's do that. Let's do that. Shit, I just cut off the recording. Well, I think Fathom is still recording, so I think we're good. Let's let me open up VS Code. So we're talking, just to be clear, we're talking about like
Pushing.
pushing for, okay, cool. Did they have you install, I know they had you install the GitHub command line, or sorry, the Git command line, but did they have you install the GitHub command line? Because there is a difference.
No, we did not.
Okay, let's try to clear out my screen because I have a lot of windows here. It's kind of a mess.
It was in the install fest, but we didn't really cover it in class at all.
Okay. So we could cover it right now fairly quickly, I think. Let me just try to clear out some of this code. Okay. Let's open up a new terminal. What should we do? Let's take one of today's lessons. So, or repositories, I should say. I'm going to scroll down to, I know you can't see this, but I'm going to scroll down to the assignment. I'm going to click on one of these challenges to open up a repository. And maybe I should share this. You all remember this part, right? I'll just share this desktop. So here, let's say I wanted to clone down this challenge. In the UI, you basically, well, maybe I'm going to step back, actually. This is a repository. This is a GitHub repository. You have tabs up here that will allow you to do things. Like later on, we'll be writing workflows using GitHub Actions. Right now, you'll find the title here. This is where you could see various branches. Of course, that's where your files are going to be, some descriptions and like, I guess, metadata. Here and here are like the two areas that you're probably going to want to use the most when you open up a new repository. So you could fork this. You don't have to. When you land your job, they may or may not enforce like a certain protocol. Whatever they enforce is what you're going to follow. And so if they want you to always fork your repositories, you're going to want to build that habit. But because you can't really predict that future, it's up to you if you want to get in the habit of doing this. I would say yes.
Yeah, Jordan West. Yeah, he made it sound like we wanted to fork it every time.
Okay, cool. So yeah, the importance being it adds an extra layer of version control, right? So it's actually a good thing that we're doing this because I can show you how to set up multiple remotes. Now that we're forked, we could see that it's telling me that I'm forked over from this original repository. And so now, if I wanted to clone this down to my local machine, just like I would have in the original, I click on code. And here's the URL I'm going to want to use with the Git CLI. Again, you have the option of using GitHub CLI. It's just a different command line interface. Any of these will work, but this is what is most commonly used. Don't try to copy the whole thing because you might sometimes miss a character or two. Just use the copy URL, the clipboard button. Let's go back over to our terminal. And I don't know what's in here. Let's just go here. Let's make a folder for today. And I am going to do a git clone with the URL that I grabbed. So what's happening right now is everything in that repository is being duplicated onto my local machine. And now that it's been moved to my local machine, I can see the folder, and it's a bit of a special folder because if I go into this directory, well, let me actually run this first. If I were to run a git CLI command out here, it's going to tell me that we're not in a Git repository. So when we go into this directory we just created, when we do an ls-a, we could see that there's a .git file, and that's what stores the configurations for this repository. And that allows us to write commands like git status. And it tells us that our branch is up to git status. Use that a lot, rely on it. Another one that you're going to want to remember is git remote. And I like to use it with --v, which asks it to be a little more verbose. And what this is doing is it's telling me that I have one origin right now, and the origin is the URL of my fork. Are we all clear on that? Cool. So we're going to go back and we're going to go to this original repository. And we are going to copy this as well. And we are going to say git remote add and pass in this URL. Whoops. Git remote add, I think. We have to do the name. So I like to name the second remote link upstream. You could technically name it whatever you want. But by doing this, now when we run git remote -v, we could see that we have two remote locations. So we have a copy of prompt evolution at my GitHub organization, and then there's one in the golf evenings and weekends, and then there's one on my local machine. Does that all make sense so far?
So basically you cloned your forked repository, right? And then you, within that repository, you added a second location to push to, which is the evening and weekends location.
Exactly. So what this allows me to do is now if I want to make changes and push them, I'm going to push them to my origin. That way, I'm not messing with this shared origin repository that everybody else is using. It's now going to go through a pull request protocol where others can review the changes that I made and either approve or reject it. So that's that additional layer of control, right? Having the upstream is really nice because let's say some updates were made in the middle of your, I don't know, working week, right? So now that some other coworker or colleague pushed their changes to main, and those changes might affect your code, you could just do a git fetch from this upstream, and it will pull the latest data from that upstream, and then do a git pull upstream and the branch that you want. So by having multiple locations, you could just very quickly interact with both. You could pull from the source, the true source, and then you could push to your fork, which is sort of that additional layer version control.
Will you scroll will you scroll up and show how you set those differences between the push when you assign the second one?
Sure. That is done with the git remote add command. And how this command works is you're specifying which of the remote commands you want to run. There's more than one remote command. So if we were to do git remote help, it's going to tell us that these are all of the git remote commands that we could run. Also, what I just did right now with git remote help, this is super, super handy. Virtually everything that you interact with, if it's designed well, should have some kind of a help module to guide you in how to use it, right? So I could do a git remote instead of a git remote add, a git remote dash help, and I'm going to get some additional details from the git manual to use this. So it might look like a bunch of junk right now, kind of is, but inside each of these square brackets, we could see the various commands that you can pass in. So you can specifically say what branch you want to pass in with a -t. If you want the main branch, use a -m, things of that nature. If you don't have to pass any of these in. You could just go straight to what you do need, which is the name of the remote repository. In my case, I wanted to name it upstream, and then the URL of where that repository exists. Does that make sense, Mike?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
So that is like your standard vanilla practice for good Git and GitHub habits. Now,
that was a little distraction. One question: Git Fetch changes what upstream you're going to. So like either upstream or origin, correct? Which is a URL location.
it's not that it changes,
Switches
right?
where you're going to push to.
Yeah, like you're telling the git fetch command where you want to fetch from.
Kind of like when you change branches.
No,
It's kind of the same idea.
A little. So when you git switch, that's how you switch branches. Git fetch though, it's more like git pull. It's going to grab data from a remote location. Unlike pull, however, it's not going to overwrite anything on your local machine. It's just grabbing metadata. It's grabbing data on the branches that exist on this repository, change control, the SHA UUIDs that you'll see in GitHub, that you'll see if you were to do things like, oh, I forget what this is alias from. But here, for example, this is a SHA, like this is a code that represents the commit that I am in. And I've only made one commit, so there's only one that exists. But if I were to make some changes, so let's say PWD is present working directory. I have really bonkers folder structure, so I like to use that and then command click to magically go to wherever I need to go. And right now I'm going to change something. I'm going to go ahead and say, with more enthusiasm, prompt evolution. Now, if I want to get status, it's going to remind me or notify me that there are changes to one of my files. So let's say I like these changes. These are intentional. This is what I want. I can do a git add readme. What this is doing is it's adding it to your, it's like a staging area for your commit, right? You're adding it to like this I don't know, zone, I guess, that eventually you will commit to your remote repository. So if I do another git status, it's going to let me know that these changes are recognized. It's going to add it to my next commit. So now that I'm ready to go, I'm going to do a git commit -m so I can pass in a message. This is my change. I mean, more likely, depending on what you're working with, you might do something like teammate, or better yet, actually. Are you familiar? Well, you might not be. You'll eventually be familiar with versioning major, minor, patch, which helps engineers on teams know if changes are backwards compatible or not. Users as well. So, like, let's say I wanted to name this commit minor or patch, actually, because it doesn't really break anything if anybody was to not update to it and change readme. So like that's my description. The -m in git commit is message. So I'm passing in a message. If I run a status again, it's going to let me know that I am now ahead of the original branch by 1 commit. And we could visualize this. I'll look up these actual commands in a sec. This is an alias that I created a long time ago, so I kind of forget everything that's in it. Sorry, the Zoom thing is blocking. Okay. So you see now how there's like 2 levels, right? This adog command is essentially another Git command that shows us a log that we can also visually render as a graph, right? Or graph as a visual, I should say. And if we were to go into my aliases file, we could see that this command is Git log. Yeah, there it is. Git log. I'm going to log everything that I want to see, and I want to decorate it so that it's all nice and pretty. And I want it all in one line, and I want it to be a graph. So this is basically the git log command with 4 separate arguments being passed in. And that's why I use an alias, because I don't want to type all that every single time. It's adog because I'm passing in A for all, D for decorate, O for one line, and G for graph. So again, if I run that, we can see a visual representation of the commits inside of my local repository. This only exists on my local machine. It doesn't exist in either remote right now. So if we were to refresh evolution here, it doesn't exist. You can't see it. You can't look for another branch. And I just realized I forgot to change branches. It's good practice to change branches whenever you're making a new change. So my bad, shame on me for forgetting that. I've made my commit, now I can push. So when you push with the practice that we discovered today with the different Git remotes, you're gonna wanna push not to the origin, sorry, that's not a good word because this is called origin, not to like the source repository, like the source of truth, but to your extra layer of control, which is what is by default called origin in by the Git command line. So I'm going to git push origin and the branch that I was on. If I had changed branches, I'd be typing in whatever branch name it was, like instead of main. So now I can hit push. It's gonna give me some info. It's telling me it finished. It ran its thing, and then it's gonna spit out a URL. Oh, and look at this. We also see those SHAs that we saw earlier, right? It's telling us that we went from this SHA to this SHA, from one branch to this branch. So that's how you read the information it spits out at you. So now if we click here and go back here, we could see that it's telling me in my remote repository that my branch is ahead of the source repository. So I can see my commit history here by clicking on this. I can see the changes that I had made, but if I go back to the original repository, I won't see that. What I can do is, I guess once I make the pull request, I'll make the pull request first. So when you click on the link, it'll take you to a place like this. You can make final reviews to see that everything you wanted to change is good to go. And when you're happy, just create a pull request. And if you need to change anything else, you could do that in the UI here as well. Usually you won't have to change these. If you're passing in the right commands from your terminal, then these will be correct. So I'm going to create my pull request. I don't know, my company uses the Jira Agile process, so we usually have to pass in like a ticket name, which usually is some number of characters in the number. That's a ticket, whatever. And there'll be a URL like in a real setting. But now I've added the info I need. I'm going to create the pull request, and any engineer that is working with a repository can see that the pull request has been made. And so they'll go here, they'll review the changes that you made. They'll see your info, they could see the commits that you created, and then they'll be able to see in those commits the actual code changes that you're passing in. You could add reviews. You could just go ahead and merge if you're happy and you think it's good to go. And are there any questions on any of that? Was anyone running along and forking the stuff down to their local machine?
Trying.
Okay. Anyone want to share? And we could troubleshoot together if you're running into any issues. All right, guess not. Well, I have been talking for way longer than I like to talk. I personally think shorter lessons are better, easier to remember, better to be succinct and to the point. Sorry if I've been going off on all different tangents. Hope this has been helpful. Give feedback when you have feedback to give. And we are going to take a break. I'll open up breakout rooms. And again, TAs and I will be in the main room to help with Git or anything else. Good? Cool.